Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back to the windswept shores of Scandinavia, where the air hums with the tang of salt water and the sharp bite of pine. You're standing in a Viking shipyard, boots sinking into the muddy ground, surrounded by half-built wooden giants that will soon dance across the North Sea. The thwack of axes biting into timber mixes with the low chatter of craftsmen, their hands calloused but steady. Seagulls wheel overhead, and the faint scent of tar tickles your nose. These aren't just boats, they're Viking ships, the sleek, fearsome vessels that carried warriors, traders, and dreamers to distant lands. Fair warning, you probably won't survive this without wishing you could try your hand at swinging an axe like a Viking shipwright. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I'm curious to see who's joining us on this sleepy journey. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not here to just admire Viking ships. You're here to uncover why they were the rock stars of the medieval seas. These weren't clunky tubs bobbing aimlessly. They were precision-crafted marvels, built to slice through waves like a hot knife through butter. Fast, flexible, and tough, they carried Vikings from the fjords of Norway to the rivers of Russia, from English monasteries to the shores of North America. How did a bunch of bearded folks with hand tools pull this off? That's the soothing mystery we're unraveling tonight. One plank at a time. Let's start with the big picture. Viking ships were the lifeblood of their world. From roughly 700 to 1100 CE, these vessels powered the Viking Age, a time when Scandinavians raided, traded, and settled across Europe and beyond. Longships, with their iconic dragon-headed prows, struck terror into coastal villages, while sturdier knarrs hauled goods and families to new lands. Without ships, Vikings might have stayed home, tending goats and grumbling about the weather. With them, they became legends. Fun fact: some ships were buried with their owners, like a cosmic Uber to the afterlife. Bet your car doesn't get that kind of send-off. What made these ships so special? For one, they were engineering miracles. Lightweight enough to be dragged overland, yet strong enough to brave Atlantic storms, they balanced speed and stability like a tightrope walker. Their shallow drafts let them glide up rivers, sneaking into places no other ships dared. And those dragon heads? Not just for show, they were meant to scare off sea spirits. Historians still argue whether the carvings were more about intimidation or superstition, but either way, they added a certain je ne sais quoi to the Viking vibe. The real magic, though, happened in the shipyards, where shipwrights were the unsung heroes. These weren't random woodchoppers. They were master craftsmen, respected like modern-day architects. Building a ship took years of know-how, passed down through generations. You'd need to know your wood like a sommelier knows wine, feel the sea in your bones, and have the patience of a saint. One wrong move, and your ship might end up as fish food. Joke's on you if you think IKEA flat packs are tough. Try assembling a longship with no instructions. Picture yourself watching a shipwright at work. His hands move with quiet confidence, shaping timber into curves that'll defy the ocean's wrath. The process was slow, deliberate, almost meditative. No power tools, no blueprints, just skill and instinct. There's something oddly calming about it, like watching a master chef knead dough, except the end result is a 70-foot warship. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some shipwrights chewed tar to soften it for caulking. Imagine the taste. Licorice meets asphalt. Bet that's not on your bubblegum list. As we drift deeper into this tale, You'll see how every step, from picking the right tree to carving the final flourish, was a labor of love and necessity. These ships weren't just transport. They were symbols of power, freedom, and survival. We'll explore the types of ships, the tools, the tricks, and the people who made it all happen. For now, let the image of that shipyard settle in your mind. The clatter of tools, the scent of fresh wood, the promise of adventure. You're not just learning history, you're breathing it, and it's as soothing as a lullaby on the waves. You're still lingering in that Viking shipyard, the salty breeze brushing your cheeks as the skeleton of a ship looms before you. The craftsmen around you don't pause, their hands busy shaping wood with a rhythm that's almost hypnotic. You're starting to get why these ships were the backbone of Viking life. But not all Viking ships were cut from the same cloth, or, well, the same oak. Some were built for speed, others for cargo, and a few for showing off. Let's stroll through the shipyard and take a closer look at the different types of vessels that made the Vikings unstoppable. It's like window shopping for medieval warships, except with more splinters and fewer credit cards. The Viking fleet was diverse, each ship tailored for a specific job. The star of the show was the Kosta longship, the sleek, sexy sports car of the Viking Age. These were the raiders' choice, built for speed and surprise. Picture a 70-foot beast with a dragon-headed prow, rowing up to 40 oarsmen, and a shallow draft that let it slink up rivers like a snake. Longships could hit speeds of 15 knots under sail, pretty zippy for the 9th century. They were perfect for hitting a monastery, grabbing the loot, and vanishing before anyone could say, "Where's my gold chalice?" Fun fact: the Gokstad ship, unearthed in Norway in 1880, is a prime example, still stunning after 1,000 years underground. Then there's the Nar, the workhorse of the Viking world. If longships were Ferraris, Nars were delivery vans, wide, sturdy, and built to haul. These ships carried families, livestock, and trade goods across oceans to places like Iceland and Greenland. They weren't as fast, relying more on sails than oars, but they could carry up to 30 tons of cargo. Imagine cramming in barrels of fish, wool, and a few grumpy goats, all while keeping your kids from falling overboard. Knarrs were the unsung heroes of Viking expansion, less flashy, but just as vital. Joke: if a longship was a rock star, a Gnar was the roadie who got the band to the gig on time. There were smaller boats, too, like Gish Fairings and Ikarvi. Fairings were nimble rowboats, often four-oared, used for fishing or zipping around fjords. Think of them as the Viking equivalent of a bicycle, handy for quick trips. Karvi were mid-sized, jack-of-all-trades ships, used for coastal raiding or short trade runs. They had 12 to 24 oars and could switch between war and commerce depending on the day's mood. A quirky tidbit: some fairings were so light, 2 Vikings could carry one over a hill to bypass rapids. Try that with your SUV, and you'll need more than a chiropractor. What tied these ships together was their adaptability. Vikings didn't just build one-size-fits-all boats. They matched the ship to the mission. Longships needed to be fast and fierce for raids, Gnars tough and roomy for settlement, Fairings small and agile for daily life. This wasn't guesswork. It came from centuries of trial and error, with each design refined to perfection. Historians still argue whether the Vikings planned their fleet diversity, or if it evolved organically as their ambitions grew. Some say it was strategic genius. Others think they just built what worked and called it a day. Let's zoom in on how these ships were used. Picture yourself on a longship, rowing with a crew of warriors as you approach a foggy English shore. The oars dip silently, the sail furled, your heart pounding. not from fear, but from the thrill of the hunt. These ships were built for stealth, their low profiles barely breaking the waterline. Now imagine you're on a nar, surrounded by bleating sheep and crates of dried cod, sailing toward a new life in Iceland. The ship creaks under the weight, but it holds steady, a floating home for your dreams. Different vibes, same Viking grit. Building these ships wasn't cheap or quick. A single longship could take months and enough timber to make a small forest weep. Knarrs required even more wood for their wider hulls, and every ship needed a skilled crew to bring it to life. The effort was worth it, though. Vikings relied on their ships like we rely on Wi-Fi. No ship, no raid, no trade, no new horizons. Joke. Imagine a Viking trying to explain to his chief why the ship's late. Sorry, boss. The dragonhead's still in the shop. As you stand in the shipyard, watching a longship's frame take shape beside a knarr's bulkier outline, you can't help but marvel at the variety. Each ship tells a story of war, of wanderlust, of survival. The shipwrights around you know this, their hands moving with purpose, crafting not just boats, but the future of their people. Next, we'll dive into the raw materials, the trees that gave these ships life. For now, let the sounds of the yard wash over you. The thunk of tools, the rustle of sails, the promise of the sea. It's enough to make you want to curl up and dream of open waters. You're weaving through a quiet Scandinavian forest, the air cool and heavy with the scent of pine needles and damp soil trailing a weathered Viking shipwright. Tall oaks loom overhead, their gnarled branches whispering in the soft wind. The shipwright stops at a massive tree, its trunk thick and sturdy, and presses a hand to its bark. "This is the one," he says, voice low, like he's greeting an old friend. You feel the weight of the moment. Selecting timber for a Viking ship isn't just chopping down a tree. It's a sacred act, tying the land to the sea in a dance as old as the fjords themselves. Settle in. You're about to learn why oak was the heart of every Viking vessel. Oak was the gold standard for Viking shipbuilding, and it's not hard to see why. This wood is tough as nails, dense, and naturally resistant to rot. Perfect for ships that'll face howling storms, icy waves, and the salty grind of the open sea. A longship built from oak could shrug off the ocean's worst tantrums and keep sailing. Plus, oak was all over Scandinavia. Think of it as the Viking equivalent of a local hardware store. Mainstream fact: a single longship could require up to 30 oak trees, enough to make a small forest wince. That's a lot of lumber for one boat, but it kept the shipyards thriving. What made oak so special wasn't just its strength, it was a shipwright's dream for versatility. Straight trunks were sliced into long, flat planks for the hull, giving the ship its sleek lines. Curved branches or roots, meanwhile, were prized for the saw ribs and knees, the internal braces that shaped the ship's graceful curves. It's like the tree was born knowing it had become a ship, offering every part for the cause. Joke. If oaks could talk, they'd probably brag about being the backbone of Viking glory. Picking the right tree was an art form, slow and deliberate. Shipwrights scoured the woods looking for oaks with straight trunks for stability and naturally bent limbs for structural finesse. Some went full druid, marking a tree with a small axe nick and leaving it standing for years to season naturally. This, they believed, made the wood stronger, letting it dry while still drawing life from the earth. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some shipwrights swore by the tree's spirit, claiming an oak's energy influenced the ship's luck. Sounds like Viking feng shui, but those ships did sail far. Oak didn't work alone, though. The Vikings were like chefs with a forest pantry, picking other woods for specific jobs. Pine, light and springy, was ideal for yacht masts and spars, keeping the ship nimble. Ash, tough but flexible, crafted oars that powered through rough seas. Birch, or willow, made small but mighty pegs and sound tree nails, the wooden nails that held everything tight. Each wood was chosen to balance strength, weight, and purpose, a masterclass in resourcefulness. Here's where historians get chatty. Some argue the Vikings were super picky, trekking to places like Denmark's lush forests for premium oak with just the right grain. Others say they were more laid back, using whatever grew nearby as long as it wasn't rotten. The truth probably depends on the job. Raiding longships got the good stuff, while everyday boats made do with local timber. Either way, their knack for picking the right tree was uncanny. Joke, if I picked trees like that, I'd end up with a ship made of toothpicks. As you stand beside that chosen oak, watching the shipwright carve a mark into its bark, you sense the tree's future. It'll be felled, hauled, and shaped into a ship that'll chase horizons. There's a soothing rhythm to it, a connection to nature that feels timeless. The Vikings didn't just build ships, they partnered with the forest, turning its gifts into vessels of legend. Next, we'll see how that oak gets prepped, transformed from a raw trunk into the smooth planks of a seaworthy ship. For now, let the rustle of leaves and the shipwright's steady steps carry you deeper into this ancient craft. You're not just learning, you're part of the story. You've left the forest behind, the scent of oak still lingering as you step back into the bustling Viking shipyard. The massive tree you helped select is now sprawled across the muddy ground, its trunk a giant waiting to be reborn. Around you, shipwrights swarm like ants, their voices mingling with the thwack of axes and the soft rasp of tools. This isn't just a pile of wood. It's the raw material for a ship that'll dance across the seas. But before it can take shape, that oak needs to be tamed, transformed from a rough log into smooth, seaworthy planks. You're about to dive into the slow, satisfying process of preparing the wood, a craft so deliberate it's practically a meditation. Pull up a log and watch. This is where the ship starts to breathe. Felling the tree was just the opener. Now comes the heavy lifting. Moving a 60-foot oak trunk to the shipyard is no picnic. You see Vikings rigging up rollers, smaller logs laid like train tracks under the massive timber. With ropes looped around it, a dozen men heave, grunting as the log lurches forward. It's a sweaty, back-breaking slog, like pushing a car uphill with no brakes. Sometimes they'd drag the log overland for miles, or float it down a river if they were lucky. Either way, getting it here is a triumph, and you're already tired just watching. Joke. If this was my cardio, I'd stick to yoga. Once the log's in the shipyard, it's time to season it. Fresh-cut wood is too wet, heavy with sap that'd make the ship sluggish and prone to rot. The Vikings stacked the logs in open sheds, raised off the ground to let air flow through. This drying process can take months, even a year for bigger pieces. You notice the shipwrights checking the wood, tapping it like it's a fine wine. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some believed the wood's soul settled during seasoning, making it stronger. Sounds like Viking mysticism, but those ships lasted centuries, so who's laughing? Mainstream fact, the Oseberg ship, dug up in Norway in 1904, had wood so well seasoned it survived over 1,000 years underground. Now for the real artistry. splitting the timber. You remember that cloving trick from the forest? It's the star here. Shipwrights grab iron chit wedges and mauls, driving them into the log's end. With a satisfying crack, the wood splits along its grain, revealing pale, smooth surfaces. This isn't just faster than sawing. It keeps the wood's fibers intact, making planks that flex without breaking when waves pound the hull. A single trunk can yield dozens of planks, each one earmarked for a specific role, like the long, thin boards for a longship's sides, or thicker ones for a nar's cargo hold. It's like carving a Thanksgiving turkey, but with higher stakes. Shaping those planks is where the shipwrights flex their skills. You watch one grab a keen, broad axe, its wide blade flashing as he shaves the rough plank into a smooth, tapered board. The swish of the axe is hypnotic, wood shavings curling like confetti. Nearby, another uses a draw knife, pulling it toward him to refine the edges. These planks need to be thin, sometimes just an inch thick for a longship, yet strong enough to withstand storms. It's a delicate balance, like baking a cake that's light but won't crumble. The shipwrights work with a calm focus, their hands guided by years of instinct. Curved pieces, like the sham ribs that brace the hull, are trickier. These come from oak branches or roots with natural bends, chosen back in the forest for their perfect arcs. You see a shipwright carving one within show adze, chipping away to match the ship's design. It's slow, precise work, like sculpting a statue, except this statue will float. Historians still argue whether the Vikings used templates to ensure these curves were consistent or just trusted their eyes. Some point to the uniform ribs in ships like the Gokstad as proof of jigs. Others say it was pure craftsmanship. Either way, the fit is so tight you'd swear it was modern. As the pile of prepared wood grows, you feel the shipyard's pulse. Each plank, each rib, is a step closer to a vessel that'll chase horizons. The shipwrights move with quiet confidence, their tools singing a steady rhythm. There's something soothing about it, like watching bread dough rise, knowing it'll become something extraordinary. Joke: if I tried this, my planks would look like a kid's art project, glitter optional. Next, we'll explore how these planks join forces with the clinker method, the Viking trick that made their ships legends. For now, let the scrape of draw knives and the scent of fresh oak carry you deeper into this ancient craft. You're not just here, you're part of the story. You're still standing in the Viking shipyard, the air thick with the scent of freshly shaved oak and the rhythmic swish of draw knives shaping planks. Piles of smooth, seasoned wood surround you, each piece ready to become part of a ship that'll slice through the seas. But how do these planks transform from a stack of lumber into the sleek, watertight hulls that made Viking ships legends? That's where the clinker method comes in, the secret sauce of Viking shipbuilding. You're about to dive into this ingenious technique, watching shipwrights weave wood together like a giant wooden quilt. It's slow, precise, and oddly soothing, like knitting a sweater for an ocean-bound dragon. Lean closer. This is where the ship starts to look like a ship. The water clinker method, also called lapstrake, is what set Viking ships apart from their clunky neighbors. Unlike other medieval boats with flat, butted planks, Viking ships used overlapping planks, layered like shingles on a roof. You watch a shipwright lay the first plank along the keel, then overlap the next one slightly, securing them with iron rivets. This overlap creates a hull that's both strong and more flexible, letting the ship bend with the waves rather than crack. It's like yoga for boats, limber enough to twist, tough enough to take a punch. Mainstream fact. The Skoldilev ships, excavated in Denmark in the 1960s, show clinker constructions so tight they barely needed caulking to stay watertight. Why was this method so brilliant? For one, it made ships lightweight. Overlapping planks used less wood than thick, heavy boards, keeping the ship nimble for raiding or river running. It also boosted strength. The overlaps distributed stress across the hull, like a team sharing a heavy load. Plus, it was watertight. Mostly, as the planks swelled when wet, sealing gaps naturally. You can almost hear the shipwrights chuckling at other cultures' leaky boats. Joke. If I built a clinker ship, it'd look like a lasagna with extra holes. Building a clinker hull starts with the keel, but we'll get to that later. For now, picture the shipwrights working upward, plank by plank. They don't just slap them on, they shape, each one to curve gently, following the ship's sleek lines. You see one using a broad axe to taper the plank's edge, ensuring a snug overlap. Another checks the fit with a practiced eye, shaving off slivers until it's perfect. It's like tailoring a suit, except this suit needs to survive an Atlantic storm. The planks are then clamped, in place with wooden pegs or ropes, holding them steady while they're fastened. Fastening is where the magic happens. You watch a shipwright drill small holes through the overlapping planks, then hammer in iron rivets. Short nails with a washer called a rove on the inside. He pounds the rivet's end flat, locking the planks tight. These rivets are spaced every few inches, creating a dotted line that's both functional and weirdly decorative, like Viking polka dots. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some ships used wooden trenails instead of iron in places, swelling when wet to create an even tighter seal. It's like the ship was designed to hug itself. The clinker method wasn't just about the planks. It shaped the ship's whole vibe. The overlaps gave the hull a stepped look, adding strength and a touch of style. You notice how the longship's sides curve upward, flaring out to keep waves at bay. This wasn't random. The clinker build let shipwrights craft hulls that were hydrodynamic, slipping through water like a seal. For NARS, the method allowed wider, deeper hulls to hold cargo without losing stability. It's versatility in action, like a recipe that works for both cupcakes and bread. Historians still argue whether the clinker method was a Viking invention or borrowed from earlier cultures. Some point to older Germanic boats with similar builds, suggesting the Vikings perfected an existing trick. Others insist the Scandinavians cooked it up themselves, driven by their obsession with sea travel. Either way, by the 8th century, the clinker method was their signature, copied poorly by envious neighbors. The Gokstad ship's hull, with its flawless overlaps, is proof they nailed it. As you watch the shipwrights layer another plank, the hull taking shape before your eyes, you feel the rhythm of their work. Tap, tap, tap goes the hammer, driving rivets home. The wood creaks softly, settling into its new role. There's a calming precision here, like folding origami, except the end result will carry warriors across oceans. Joke. If I tried riveting, I'd probably nail my sleeve to the ship. Next, we'll meet the tools that make this clinker magic possible, from axes to adzes. For now, let the steady clunk of rivets and the faint creak of oak lull you deeper into the shipyard's spell. You're not just watching history, you're floating in it. You're knee-deep in the Viking shipyard now. The clinker-built hull before you starting to look like a proper ship, its overlapping planks gleaming under the Nordic sun. The clunk of rivets still echoes, but your eyes are drawn to the shipwright's hands, deftly wielding tools that seem to dance with the wood. These aren't your average toolbox gadgets. Each one is a specialized instrument, honed for the delicate art of shipbuilding. You're about to meet the axes, adzes, and augers that turn raw oak into seafaring legends. It's a slow, rhythmic process, like a carpenter's lullaby, and watching it unfold feels as calming as a fireside chat. Settle in. Let's unpack the Viking Shipwrights toolkit. The broad axe is the shipyard's rock star, and you see one in action right away. Its wide, flat blade, sometimes a foot across, slices through oak like butter, shaving planks to the perfect thickness. A shipwright swings it with a smooth swish, peeling off curls of wood that pile up like autumn leaves. This tool isn't just for brute force. It's precise, letting craftsmen taper planks for the clinker overlaps you saw earlier. Mainstream fact: archaeological finds, like the tools from the Mastermere chest in Sweden, show broad axes with razor-sharp edges, proof of their central role in Viking craftsmanship. Joke: if I swung one of those, I'd probably shave my beard off instead of the wood. Next up is the adze, a quirky tool that looks like an axe had a baby with a hoe. Its curved blade is set at a right angle to the handle, perfect for hollowing and shaping. You watch a shipwright use it to carve the gentle curves of a hull rib, chipping away with a steady thwack, thwack. The adze is a finesse player, smoothing rough surfaces or digging out wood for fittings like oar ports. It's versatile too. Flip it over, and the flat back doubles as a hammer. Here's a fun tidbit. Some shipwrights claimed the adze sang when it hit the wood just right, a high-pitched hum that signaled perfect technique. Bet that's not in your power drill's repertoire. Drilling holes for those iron rivets or wooden trenails requires an auger, a hand-cranked drill that's pure Viking ingenuity. You see one in use, its spiral bit chewing through a plank with a low creak. The shipwright turns it slowly, sweat beading on his brow, creating holes precise enough for a watertight fit. Augers came in sizes from needle-thin to thumb-thick, depending on the job. They were so vital that a good auger was a shipwright's pride, often passed down through generations. Imagine trying to drill through oak with just elbow grease. Makes your cordless drill look like cheating. For finer work, the draw knife is the go-to. You spot a shipwright pulling one toward him, its two handles letting him sculpt planks with surgical precision. The scrape of the blade is hypnotic, shaving wood into feather-thin edges for tight clinker overlaps. It's like peeling an apple, except the apple's a future longship. The draw knife also shapes smaller bits, like oar handles or decorative carvings. It's delicate work, requiring a steady hand and a sharp eye, and you can't help but admire the focus it demands. Don't forget the gouge and hot chisel, the unsung heroes of detail work. Gouges, with their curved blades, hollow out grooves for fittings or carve intricate patterns on prows. Chisels, sharp and straight, refine joints or cut slots for mast steps. You see a shipwright tapping a chisel with a wooden mallet. Each tap a note in the shipyard's symphony. These tools let Vikings add flair to their ships, turning functional vessels into works of art. Joke: if I used a gouge, I'd probably carve my initials by accident. Maintaining these tools was a craft in itself. You notice a shipwright sharpening an adze on a whetstone, the scritch-scratch blending with the yard's hum. Tools were often forged by local blacksmiths, tailored to the shipwright's grip. Some even had personalized marks. Think Viking monograms. Historians still argue whether shipwrights made their own tools or relied on specialists. Some say the best craftsmen forged their own, while others point to trade records showing tool imports from places like Francia. Either way, a dull tool was a shipwright's nightmare, like a chef with a rusty knife. As you watch the shipwrights wield their axes and adzes, the hull growing plank by plank, you feel the shipyard's pulse. Each tool has a purpose, a voice in the chorus of creation. The swish of the broad axe, the thwack of the adze, the creak of the auger. They're as soothing as a heartbeat, grounding you in this ancient craft. It's not just about building a ship. It's about coaxing life from wood, one careful cut at a time. Next, we'll zoom in on the keel, the ship's spine that holds it all together. For now, let the tool's steady rhythm and the faint scent of oak shavings carry you deeper into the Viking world. You're not just here, you're crafting history. You're still immersed in the Viking shipyard, the clatter of tools and the tang of oak shavings filling the air as the clinker-built hull takes shape before you. The shipwrights' axes and adzes have worked their magic, turning planks into a sleek, overlapping shell. But none of this would hold together without the ship's foundation. The keel, the sturdy spine that anchors every Viking vessel. You're about to watch this critical piece come to life, carved from a single massive oak log with a precision that's both awe-inspiring and oddly calming. It's like watching a sculptor coax a figure from stone, except this creation will carry Vikings across oceans. Step closer. The keel is where the ship's story truly begins. The keel is the heart of a Viking ship, a long, straight beam that runs along the bottom, giving the vessel its structure and stability. Think of it as the ship's backbone, holding the hull together and keeping it balanced, whether it's slicing through stormy seas or gliding up a shallow river. For a longship, the keel might stretch 50 to 70 feet, while a nars is shorter but thicker to support cargo. You see a massive oak log lying in the shipyard, chosen back in the forest for its flawless grain. This isn't just any tree. It's the one the shipwrights staked their reputation on. Crafting the keel starts with hewing, and you watch a shipwright attack the log with a broad axe. The thwack of each swing sends chips flying, gradually shaping the round trunk into a rectangular beam. The goal is a keel that's flat on the bottom for stability, but slightly curved upward at the ends, called the wasu rocker, to help the ship pivot smoothly. It's a delicate balance, too flat, and the ship's sluggish, too curved, and it's unstable. Mainstream fact: the Gokstad ship's keel, unearthed in Norway in 1880, is so perfectly hewed it looks like it could still sail today. Joke: if I tried hewing a keel, it'd end up looking like a giant pretzel. The shipwright doesn't just hack away, he measures constantly, using a hwan, line, and plumb to ensure the keel is straight. You notice him squinting along the beam, checking for twists or warps. A crooked keel means a crooked ship, and that's a one-way ticket to Davy Jones's locker. Some shipwrights even mark the wood with charcoal, sketching guidelines like a carpenter's blueprint. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some Viking communities, the keel's first cut was a ritual, with a small offering, like mead or a carved rune, tossed to the gods for luck. No pressure, but if the gods weren't happy, your ship might spring a leak. Once hewed, the keel is smoothed, with an arm adze and a draw knife, refining its shape until it's as sleek as a seal. You hear the scrape of the draw knife, wood shavings curling like ribbons. The keel's top edge is notched to fit the first clinker planks, ensuring a tight seal. For longships, the keel is narrow to boost speed, while NARs have wider keels for stability under heavy loads. It's like choosing between a sports car and a pickup truck. Form follows function. Attaching the stem and stern posts, the curved pieces at the ship's ends, is next. These are carved from oak with natural bends, often root sections, to match the keel's rocker. You watch a shipwright fit the stem post, chiseling a joint so precise it clicks into place like a Lego piece. Iron rivets or wooden treenails lock it tight, and you can't help but marvel at the fit. These posts give the ship its iconic upturned prow, perfect for cutting waves or scaring the pants off coastal villagers. Joke: with my luck, I'd rivet the stem post upside down and sail in circles. The keel's placement in the shipyard is a big deal. You see the shipwrights set it on a row of stocks, wooden supports, to keep it level during construction. They check it obsessively with levels made from water-filled tubes, ensuring it's true. A misaligned keel could throw off the entire hull, like building a house on a wonky foundation. Historians still argue whether Vikings used standardized keel designs or customized each one. Some point to the similar keels of the Skoldilev ships as evidence of templates, while others say shipwrights relied on experience, tweaking each keel to suit the ship's purpose. As the keel takes shape, you feel the shipyard's energy shift. This isn't just a piece of wood. It's the ship's soul, the anchor for every plank and rib to come. The shipwrights work with a quiet reverence, their tools singing a steady rhythm. Thwack, scrape, tap. It's as soothing as rain on a tin roof, drawing you deeper into the craft. Next, we'll see how the hull grows from this foundation, plank by plank, into a vessel ready for the sea. For now, let the keel's solid presence and the soft creak of settling wood lull you further into the Viking world. You're not just watching, you're building history, one cut at a time. The Viking shipyard hums around you, the keel now firmly set on its stocks like a proud spine waiting for its body. The thwack of axes and the soft scrape of draw knives fill the air, mingling with the briny scent of the nearby fjord. With the keel in place, the shipwrights are ready to give this vessel its form. The hull, the smooth, curved shell that'll make it glide through waves like a sea serpent. You're about to watch the hull take shape, plank by plank, as the clinker method you saw earlier transforms the ship into a sleek, seaworthy marvel. It's a slow, meticulous process, like assembling a giant puzzle, and there's a soothing rhythm to it that feels like a lullaby carved in oak. Lean in. This is where the ship starts to sing. The hull is the ship's skin, built up from the keel using those overlapping clinker planks. You see a shipwright lay the first plank, called the garboard, snug against the keel's notched edge. It's fastened with iron rivets, each tap of the hammer echoing through the yard. The next plank overlaps it, slightly higher, creating that shingle-like pattern you noticed before. This isn't random. Each plank is carefully shaped to curve with the ship's lines, flaring outward for stability and curling upward at the ends to dance over waves. For a longship, the hull is narrow and sleek, built for speed. For a nar, it's wider and deeper, ready to haul cargo. Mainstream fact: the Skoldilev ship II, a longship from the 11th century, had a hull so streamlined it could hit 15 knots, faster than most medieval boats. Shaping each plank is an art. You watch a shipwright use a broad axe to taper the wood, thinning it toward the ends for flexibility. The swish of the blade is hypnotic, wood shavings piling up like snow. He checks the curve against the growing hull, shaving slivers until it fits like a glove. These planks aren't flat. They're subtly twisted to follow the ship's form, a process called spiling. It's like cutting fabric for a tailored dress, except this dress needs to survive a North Sea storm. The shipwrights work by eye, their hands guided by years of instinct, though some use simple jigs, wooden guides, to ensure cost consistency. The hull's strength comes from its ribs, the internal braces that give it shape. You see a shipwright fitting a rib, carved from a curved oak branch back in the forest. These ribs, or frames, are lashed to the planks with bow willow withies, flexible twigs that hold them tight until the hull's complete. The creak of the withies being twisted is oddly satisfying, like cracking your knuckles. Once the hull's fully planked, the ribs are permanently fastened with tree nails, wooden pegs that swell when fought for a rock-solid grip. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some ribs were left slightly loose to let the hull flex, like a dancer's joints, making the ship more resilient in rough seas. Bet your car's chassis doesn't bend like that. Fastening the planks is a team effort. You watch two shipwrights work in sync. One drills holes with an auger, the other hammers in rivets, pounding the ends flat against roves inside the hull. The tap-tap-tap is a steady beat, like a drummer keeping time. The rivets are spaced every few inches, creating a dotted pattern that's both functional and weirdly aesthetic. For NARs, extra rivets add strength to support heavy loads, while longships use fewer to stay light. It's a balance of toughness and agility, like choosing between armor and sneakers. The hull's shape isn't just about looks. It's hydrodynamic, designed to slip through water with minimal resistance. You notice the longship's hull curving gently upward at the prow and stern, cutting waves like a knife. This symmetry lets it sail forward or backward, handy for quick getaways after a raid. NARs, with their broader hulls, sit lower in the water, prioritizing stability over speed. It's form-meeting function, and you can't help but admire the thought behind it. Joke: if I designed a hull, it'd probably look like a bathtub with ambitions. Historians still argue whether hull shapes were standardized or varied by shipwright. Some point to the uniform curves of ships like the Oseberg as evidence of shared designs, possibly passed down through guilds. Others say each ship was a custom job, tailored to the owner's needs. A warlord's longship might be sleeker than a trader's NAR. Either way, the precision is staggering, with planks fitting so tightly you'd think they were glued. As the hull rises, plank by plank, you feel the ship coming alive. The shipwrights move with quiet confidence, their tools weaving a tapestry of wood. The creak of settling planks, the tap of rivets, the faint rustle of withies. It's a symphony that pulls you deeper into the craft. Next, we'll explore how the mast and sail are added, turning this hull into a wind-chasing marvel. For now, let the hull's graceful curves and the steady rhythm of construction lull you further into the Viking world. You're not just watching, you're shaping history, one plank at a time. The Viking shipyard pulses around you, the hull of the ship now a graceful, clinker-built shell, its overlapping planks curving like the ribs of a giant sea creature. The tap-tap of rivets and the soft creak of settling wood fill the air, mingling with the briny tang of the fjord. With the hull shaped and strong, the shipwrights turn their eyes skyward, ready to add the mast and sail, the duo that'll catch the wind and send this vessel chasing horizons. You're about to watch these elements come together, transforming the ship from a floating frame into a wind-powered marvel. It's a process as deliberate as threading a needle, and there's a soothing rhythm to it, like the gentle sway of waves. Step closer. This is where the ship learns to fly.
The Wasnam.
Mast is the ship's lifeline to the wind, a towering pine pole that stands tall amid the hull's curves. You see a shipwright hauling a long, straight pine log, light and flexible, just like you learned back in the forest. Pine's the go-to for masts because it bends without breaking, perfect for absorbing the wind's force. The mast for a longship might reach 30 feet, while a NARS is shorter but sturdier to handle heavy sails. Mainstream fact: the Gokstad ship, excavated in 1880, had a mast slot so precisely carved it could hold the pole steady in a storm. Crafting it starts with hewing, using a broad axe to shape the log into a smooth, round pole. The swish of the axe is hypnotic, wood chips flying like confetti. The base of the mast, called the pike mast step, is a chunky oak block fixed to the keel. You watch a shipwright chisel a square socket into it, each tap of the mallet echoing through the yard. The mast slots into this step, held firm by its own weight and the ship's structure. It's not bolted down. Vikings liked flexibility, letting the mast be lowered for river travel or storms. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some shipwrights carved runes into the mast step for luck, like a Viking version of a bumper sticker. Joke: if I carved runes, they'd probably say, "Help, I'm lost." Raising the mast is a team effort. You see a dozen Vikings gather, ropes looped around the pole as they heave it upright with a chorus of grunts. The mast slots into the step with a satisfying thud, and they secure it with shrouds, ropes tied to the hull to keep it steady. These shrouds are made from twisted hemp or walrus hide, strong enough to withstand gale-force winds. The shipwrights tug and adjust, their hands moving like sailors tuning a guitar, ensuring the mast stands true. It's a dance of balance and strength, and you can't help but feel the ship's spirit rising with it. Now for the sail. The ship's wings. Viking sails were massive, often 100 square meters for a longship, woven from wool. Yes, sheep fuzz. You spot a pile of coarse, dyed wool cloth, red and white stripes bold against the oak hull. Wool's tough, water-resistant, and holds dye well, making it ideal for sails that double as status symbols. Weaving a sail took months, usually done by women in the community, their looms clacking through long winters. The sail is stitched into a square or rectangle, reinforced with leather strips to handle wind stress. Fun fact: the Bayeux tapestry from the 11th century shows Viking-style ships with striped sails, proving they were as flashy as they were functional. Rigging the sail is next. You watch a shipwright hoisted up the mast using a yard, a horizontal wooden beam tied with hemp ropes. The sail unfurls with a soft flap, catching the breeze like a giant kite. It's secured with sheets, ropes, that let the crew adjust its angle, tweaking it to grab every gust. For longships, the sail is the main power source, with oars as backup. NARS rely almost entirely on wind, their wide sails built for endurance. The rigging is simple but clever, letting even a small crew handle it. Joke: if I rigged a sail, I'd probably tie myself to the mast by accident. Historians still argue whether Viking sails were always square, or if some used triangular ones for better upwind sailing. Some point to later medieval ships with triangular, lateen sails as evidence of Viking experimentation, while others insist square sails ruled for their simplicity. Either way, the wool sails were game changers, letting Vikings cross oceans when others hugged the coast. As the sail catches a gust, billowing above the hull, you feel the ship's potential. The shipwrights step back, nodding, their work a quiet triumph. The creak of the mast, the flap of the sail, the faint hum of ropes. It's a melody that pulls you deeper into the craft. Next, we'll explore the decorative carvings that give these ships their fearsome flair. For now, let the sail's gentle sway and the steady rhythm of the yard lull you further into the Viking world. You're not just here. You're sailing through history, one breeze at a time. The Viking shipyard buzzes around you, the newly rigged sail flapping gently above the clinker-built hull, its red and white stripes catching the Nordic sunlight. The creak of the mast and the soft thud of tools blend with the salty tang of the fjord, pulling you deeper into this ancient craft. With the ship's structure and sail in place, the shipwrights now turn to the finishing touches that'll make this vessel a legend, the decorative elements. You're about to watch them carve fearsome and beautiful designs into the wood, turning a functional ship into a floating work of art. It's a slow, intricate process, like painting a masterpiece with chisels, and there's a soothing calm in its precision, as gentle as a whisper on the waves. Step closer. This is where the ship gets its soul. Viking ships weren't just built to sail. They were crafted to inspire awe and fear. The most iconic decoration is the chained dragon head on the prow, a snarling beast carved from oak to ward off enemies and sea spirits alike. You see a shipwright perched on a scaffold, his chisel and gouge dancing across a block of wood. Each tap of his mallet shapes scales, bared teeth, and glaring eyes, the dragon emerging stroke by stroke. These carvings aren't just for show, they're symbols of power, meant to terrify coastal villagers or appease Norse gods like Njord. Mainstream fact: the Oseberg ship, buried around 820 CE, boasts a prow so intricately carved it looks like a museum piece, proof of the Vikings' artistic flair. But dragons aren't the only motifs. You notice another shipwright etching interlacing knotwork along the gunwale, the ship's upper edge. These swirling patterns, inspired by Norse mythology, mimic the coils of serpents or the weave of fate. They're not random doodles. Each knot tells a story, maybe of a hero or a god. The scrape of the gouge is hypnotic, wood shavings curling like tiny scrolls. For Nars, decorations are simpler, maybe a carved wave pattern, but longships go all out, their prows screaming, "Don't mess with us." Here's a quirky tidbit. Some shipwrights believed the carvings held protective magic, like a Viking version of a lucky rabbit's foot. Bet your car's air freshener doesn't double as a talisman. Carving isn't limited to the prow. You see designs on the charms, stem, and stern posts, the curved ends rising from the keel. A shipwright uses a draw knife to etch runes, Norse letters that might name the ship or honor its owner. Runes like Fehu for wealth or Ansuz for wisdom add a personal touch. The swish of the knife is steady, almost meditative. Some ships even have carved oar ports or shields along the sides, painted in bold reds and blacks for extra flair. It's like bedazzling a warship, Viking style. Joke: if I tried carving runes, they'd probably spell oops in Old Norse. The process is painstaking. You watch a shipwright sketch the design with gesso charcoal. First, his hand steady as he traces curves and knots. Then comes the carving, using tools so sharp they could shave a beard. Gouges hollow out deep lines for contrast, while chisels refine details like a dragon's scales. The wood's grain matters. Carve against it, and you risk splintering. Shipwrights often pick up fine-grained oak for carvings to ensure smooth results, a trick you recall from selecting timber way back in the forest. It's a blend of art and science, like sculpting a statue that'll sail. These decorations aren't just pretty, they're practical. Dragon heads could be removed when approaching friendly ports, signaling peace. You see a shipwright fitting a prow with a pegged joint, easy to pop off and store. This kept allies calm and saved the carving from wear. Paint, made from ochre or charcoal, protects the wood and adds vibrancy. Red was a favorite, symbolizing power, though blue and yellow pop up in some finds. The slap of a brush applying paint adds to the yard's rhythm, a splash of color against the oak's pale glow. Historians still argue whether these carvings were purely symbolic or had deeper ritual meaning. Some say they were status symbols, showing off a chieftain's wealth. Carving a dragon head took weeks, after all. Others argue they tied to Norse beliefs, invoking gods or spirits to guide the ship. The Oseberg's elaborate designs suggest ritual use, maybe for a queen's burial, but everyday longships were simpler. Either way, the carvings made Viking ships unforgettable, their prows cutting through fog like myths come to life. As the dragon head takes shape, its eyes glaring fiercely, you feel the ship's personality emerge. The shipwrights work with quiet focus, their chisels singing a soft tap, tap. It's as calming as a heartbeat, grounding you in this ancient art. Next, we'll dive into how they waterproof and maintain these ships, keeping them afloat through storms and raids. For now, let the scrape of gouges and the faint glow of carved oak lull you deeper into the Viking world. You're not just here, you're etching history, one knot at a time. The Viking shipyard hums with life around you, the carved dragon head on the ship's prow now glaring fiercely, its oak scales gleaming under the Nordic sun. The tap of chisels and the soft flap of the striped wool sail blend with the fjord's briny scent, pulling you deeper into this ancient craft. With the hull shaped, the mast rigged, and the decorations etched, the ship looks ready to leap into the sea. But there's one critical step left before it can face the waves: waterproofing and maintenance. You're about to watch the shipwrights seal and care for this vessel, ensuring it stays watertight through storms, raids, and long voyages. It's a slow, sticky process, like basting a roast for the ocean, and there's a soothing calm in its methodical rhythm, as gentle as a tide lapping the shore. Grab a spot by the hull. This is where the ship gets its armor. Viking ships were wooden, which means they were at constant war with water. Without proper waterproofing, even the finest oak hull would swell, leak, or rot, turning a longship into a soggy coffin. The shipwright's solution was caulking, a technique to seal the clinker overlaps you saw earlier. You watch a shipwright stuff wool or animal hair, often sheep or cow, into the gaps between planks using a caulking iron to pack it tight. The thump of the iron is steady, like a heartbeat. This caulking swells when wet, creating a watertight seal that's both simple and genius. Mainstream fact: the Skulldalev Ship 5, a 11th century longship, had caulking so effective it kept the hull intact for centuries underwater. Next comes the tar, the ship's slimy shield. You see a shipwright stirring a bubbling cauldron over a fire, the air thick with the acrid, piney smell of pine tar, made by burning pine wood until it oozes sticky resin. He slathers it over the hull with a brush, the slap of each stroke coating the planks in a glossy black sheen. Tar seals the wood against moisture and repels worms that bore into ships, like a Viking version of bug spray. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some shipwrights chewed tar to soften it before applying, claiming it tasted better than it smelled. Try that at your next BBQ, and you'll get some funny looks. The tar isn't just slapped on, it's methodical. You notice the shipwright working from keel to gunwale, ensuring every rivet and seam is coated. For longships, the tar is applied thinly to keep the ship light, while NARs get a thicker layer to protect their cargo-heavy hulls. The hull is tarred inside and out, a double defense against leaks. This process is repeated regularly, every season or after a long voyage, to keep the ship fighting fit. Joke: if I tried tarring a ship, I'd end up stuck to the hull like a human flytrap. Maintenance goes beyond tar. You see shipwrights inspecting the hull for cracks or loose rivets, tapping planks with a mallet to listen for hollow sounds that signal rot. They replace damaged planks with new ones, shaped to match the originals, a process so precise it's like patching a quilt. Oars and masts get their own care, sanded and oiled with linseed oil to prevent splintering. Sails, those woolen wings you saw rigged, are patched or restitched, their hemp ropes checked for fraying. It's a full-time job, and many Viking crews included a dedicated shipwright for repairs on long voyages. The ship's bilge, the lowest part of the hull, needs special attention. Water inevitably seeps in, so Vikings bail it out with wooden scoops, or let it drain through small holes plugged with corks. You watch a shipwright carve a cork, fitting it snugly into a drain hole. It's a low-tech solution, but it works, keeping the ship dry enough to sail. The bilge also gets a layer of shingle ballast, small stones, to stabilize the ship, adjusted for each voyage's load. It's like fine-tuning a guitar, except the stakes are sinking or surviving. Historians still argue whether waterproofing was a shipwright's job or a crew's responsibility. Some say shipwrights handled initial tarring, leaving maintenance to sailors, while others point to sagas describing chieftains overseeing repairs, suggesting a team effort. Evidence from ships like the Oseberg, with its well-preserved tarred hull, shows the care invested in keeping these vessels seaworthy. Either way, waterproofing was a ritual, tying the ship to its makers and its sea-bound fate. As the tar glistens on the hull, the shipwrights step back, their brushes dripping. The ship looks invincible now, its black sheen a promise of adventure. The thump of caulking irons, the slap of tar brushes, the faint creak of the hull. It's a melody that grounds you in this craft. Next, we'll explore the cultural weight of these ships, why they were more than just boats to the Vikings. For now, let the tar's piney scent and the steady rhythm of maintenance lull you deeper into the Viking world. You're not just here, you're preserving history, one brushstroke at a time. You're still soaking in the Viking shipyard's rhythm, the freshly tarred hull gleaming black under the Nordic sky, its dragon-headed prow staring out like a guardian. The slap of tar brushes lingers in your ears, mingling with the fjord's salty breeze and the soft creak of the ship settling on its stocks. This vessel, with its clinker planks, woolen sail, and carved runes, is ready to conquer the seas. But to the Vikings, it's more than a boat. You're about to dive into the cultural significance of these ships, why they were woven into the heart of Viking life, from cradle to grave. It's a story of pride, myth, and survival, told with a quiet reverence that's as soothing as a fireside tale. Lean back. This is where the ship becomes a legend. To the Vikings, ships were more than transport. They were symbols of power, freedom, and identity. In a world of harsh winters and rugged fjords, the sea was their highway, and ships were their wings. A chieftain's longship, with its carved prow and striped sail, wasn't just a war machine. It was a status symbol, like a medieval supercar parked in the harbor. Owning one meant wealth, influence, and the ability to raid or trade far beyond your village. Mainstream fact: Norse sagas, like the Saga of the Greenlanders, describe ships as treasures, often named, like Ormur, serpent, or Havingston, sea stallion, to reflect their owner's glory. You can almost hear a Viking bragging about his ship's speed over a horn of mead. Ships were also tied to Pomo mythology. The Vikings believed the sea was alive with spirits, from the serpent Jormungandr to the god Njord, who ruled winds and waves. A ship's carvings, like that dragon head you saw, weren't just decor. They were offerings to these forces, meant to ensure safe voyages. You picture a crew whispering prayers to Njord as they sail, the flap of the sail a reply from the gods. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some ships were sprinkled with blood during launch rituals, a nod to Odin or Thor for protection. Sounds messy, but it beats sinking in a storm. Beyond myth, ships were lifelines. In Scandinavia's scattered communities, they connected people to trade, food, and allies. Knarrs hauled fish, furs, and amber to markets in Byzantium, bringing back silver and spices. Longships carried warriors to raid monasteries, their loot fueling villages back home. You imagine a Knarr docking, its hold stuffed with wool and walrus ivory, families rushing to unload it. Ships made the Viking Age possible. Without them, there'd be no Vinland, no Dublin, no legend. It's like Wi-Fi for the 9th century. Lose it, and you're stuck. The cultural weight of ships extended to death. Vikings saw life as a journey, and ships carried them into the afterlife. You recall the Oseberg ship, buried with a high-ranking woman around 820 CE, its carved prow guiding her to Valhalla or another realm. These ship burials were reserved for the elite, packed with treasures like jewelry and sleds. You picture mourners placing offerings aboard, the clink of metal echoing as they bid farewell. Even poorer Vikings might be buried with a small boat or ship-shaped stones, a nod to the sea's eternal pull. It's a poignant image, as calming as a sunset over water. Ships shaped community too. Building one, as you've seen, took a village, shipwrights, weavers, blacksmiths, all working together. Owning a ship often meant shared responsibility. Crews were bound by loyalty, splitting raid profits or trade hauls. You see a chieftain rallying his crew, their cheers echoing across the yard. Ships fostered bonds, like a team building a startup, except the startup raids Lindisfarne. Joke: if I joined a Viking crew, I'd probably get seasick before we left the fjord. They even inspired art and stories. Norse poetry, called skaldic verse, praises ships as sea steeds or wave runners, their sails like wings. You imagine a skald reciting verses by a fire, the crackle of logs underscoring tales of ships outrunning storms. Runestones, carved memorials often depict ships, their prows curling like calligraphy. It's a reminder that ships weren't just tools, they were muses, etched into Viking culture as deeply as those runes on the stem post. Historians still argue whether ships were more practical or symbolic. Some say their role in trade and war outweighed their cultural clout, pointing to the practical design of knarrs. Others argue their mythic status, burials, carvings, poems, made them sacred, especially longships. The Oseberg's ornate build suggests ritual over function, but most ships served both. Either way, they were the Viking soul tying earth, sea, and sky. As you gaze at the ship, its tarred hull and carved prow glowing, you feel its weight in Viking hearts, the creak of the mast, the rustle of the sail, the faint hum of the yard. It's a lullaby of pride and myth. Next, we'll meet the famous ships that sailed into history. For now, let the ship's quiet presence and the steady pulse of the yard lull you deeper into the Viking world. You're not just here, you're living history, one story at a time. The Viking shipyard still wraps you in its rhythm. The tarred hull with its dragon-headed prow standing proud before you, a silent testament to the Viking's soul. The creak of the mast and the faint flap of the woolen sail drift through the air, mingling with the fjord's briny tang, grounding you in this ancient world. You've seen how ships were more than boats. They were power, myth, and survival woven into Viking life. Now let's sail with the Wao-Tzu. Famous Viking ships that carved their names into history, vessels that carried warriors, explorers, and legends across seas and centuries. It's a journey through tales of triumph and mystery, told with a gentle cadence that's as soothing as waves lapping a hull. Settle in. These ships are ready to carry you into the sagas. Let's start with the Oseberg ship, a masterpiece you've heard about before. Buried around 820 CE in Norway, this longship was a queen's final voyage, likely for a high-ranking woman sent to the afterlife with treasures like sleds and tapestries. You picture it gliding through fog, its carved prow, those swirling knots you saw being etched, gleaming with mystique. At 70 feet long, it's sleek but ornate, more ceremonial than war-ready. Mainstream fact: excavated in 1904, the Oseberg's wood was so well preserved you can still see the shipwrights' tool marks, a snapshot of their craft frozen in time. Its delicate build suggests it sailed calm waters, perhaps for royal tours. Joke: if I had a burial ship, it'd probably be a canoe with a leaky paddle. Next is the Gokstad ship, a warrior's ride from around 890 CE, also unearthed in Norway. You imagine it charging across the North Sea, its 80-foot hull packed with oarsmen, the dragon head you admired snarling at the horizon. Unlike the Oseberg, this longship was built for battle, its sturdy clinker planks and deep keel perfect for open seas. It could carry 32 oarsmen and hit speeds to outrun any foe. When found in 1880, it held a chieftain's grave, complete with shields and a tent frame. Viking glamping, anyone? The Gokstad's mast step, carved like you saw earlier, still stands firm, a testament to its seaworthiness. You can almost hear the splash of oars as it raids an English coast. Then there's Skuldelev Ship 2, a lean, mean raiding machine from the 11th century, sunk deliberately in Denmark's Roskilde fjord to block invaders. You picture it slicing through waves, its 100-foot hull, so long it dwarfs the Oseberg, carrying 60 warriors. Built in Dublin around 1042, it shows the Vikings' far-reaching influence, blending Norse and Irish craftsmanship. Its clinker planks, caulked with wool you saw stuffed in gaps, were so tight it barely leaked. Here's a quirky tidbit. Divers found traces of red paint on its hull, hinting at a flashy look, like a Viking hot rod. When excavated in the 1960s, it inspired a replica, Havingsten fra Glendeloof, which sailed 1,000 miles to prove its speed. Joke: If I sailed that replica, I'd get lost before leaving the harbor. Don't forget. Skuldelev Ship 3, a Nar that hauled trade goods across the Baltic. You envision it plodding through seas, its wide hull stuffed with furs and amber, the striped sail you saw rigged catching steady winds. At 46 feet, it's smaller but tougher, built for endurance over speed. Found with other Skuldelev wrecks, it shows the practical side of Viking life. Less raiding, more trading. Its deep keel and thick planks like those you watched being shaped held tons of cargo without buckling. It's the unsung hero of Viking expansion, ferrying families to Iceland while longships stole the spotlight. These ships weren't just vessels, they were stories. The Oseberg carried a queen to eternity, its carvings whispering myths. The Gokstad powered raids, its shields clattering like war drums. Skuldelev II struck fear, its red hull a blur on the horizon, while Skuldelev III built wealth, its hold creaking with goods. Each left a mark, their timbers echoing sagas of adventure. You feel their legacy in the shipyard, where the ship before you carries the same spirit, its tarred planks and runes ready for its own tale. Historians still argue whether these famous ships were typical or elite. Some say the Oseberg's artistry marks it as a one-off for royalty, while the Gokstad and Skuldelevs reflect standard designs. Others argue their preservation biases our view. Most ships rotted away, leaving only the grandest to dazzle us. Either way, they show the Vikings' mastery, from the forest oaks you picked to the clinker hulls you watched rise. Joke. If my ship made history, it'd be famous for sinking in the dock. As you gaze at the ship, its prow glowing with fresh carvings, you feel the weight of those legends. The creak of the hull, the flap of the sail, the faint hum of the yard. It's a lullaby of epic voyages. Next, we'll step into the tight-knit world of the shipbuilding community. For now, let the ship's quiet presence and the steady pulse of the yard lull you deeper into the Viking world. You're not just here, you're sailing through history, one saga at a time. The Viking shipyard still holds you in its gentle grip, the tarred hull with its fierce dragon head gleaming before you, a silent echo of legends like the Oseberg and Gokstad ships. The creak of the mast and the soft flap of the woolen sail weave through the air, blending with the fjord's salty breeze, anchoring you in this ancient world. Those famous ships weren't built by lone geniuses, but by tight-knit communities, where every hand, from shipwright to ropemaker, played a part. You're about to step into the shipbuilding community, a bustling network of craftsmen, families, and apprentices who breathed life into these vessels. It's a story of teamwork and tradition, told with a quiet warmth that's as soothing as a hearth's glow. Lean in, this is where the shipyard becomes a village. Shipbuilding was a small, communal effort, requiring more than just the shipwrights you've watched wielding axes and adzes. You see a crowd around the ship, blacksmiths forging iron rivets, weavers stitching wool sails, and farmers hauling cut timber from the forest you visited. Even children pitch in, carrying wood shavings or fetching water, their chatter adding to the yard's hum. A longship could take months to build, a Nar even longer, and no one worked alone. Mainstream fact: archaeological sites, like the Roskilde shipyard in Denmark, show evidence of large-scale production, with tool caches and woodpiles suggesting dozens of workers collaborated on each ship. It's like a medieval assembly line, but with better beards. The shipwright is the yard's maestro, and you spot one directing the crew, his voice calm but firm. He's not just a craftsman, he's a leader, respected like a village elder. His knowledge, passed down through generations, covers everything from cloving oak to rigging sails. Apprentices hover nearby, soaking up his every move, their hands clumsy but eager. You notice a young boy mimicking the shipwright's adze strokes, practicing on a scrap log. It's a slow apprenticeship, often lasting years, but it ensures the craft lives on. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some apprentices carved their initials into hidden parts of the ship, like Viking graffiti. Bet they hoped future archaeologists would find their tag. Beyond the yard, the community's reach is wide. You see women weaving sails in nearby huts, their looms clacking through the day, producing the striped wool you admired. Others twist hemp into ropes or boil pine tar in cauldrons, the smoky scent drifting over. Blacksmiths hammer out rivets and tools in a nearby forge, the clang a steady beat. Even the local farmer, whose ox hauls logs, is part of this web. It's a symphony of skills, each note vital to the ship's song. Joke: if I joined this crew, I'd probably weave a sail with more holes than a Swiss cheese. The shipyard isn't just work. It's a social hub. You hear laughter as shipwrights trade stories over a midday meal of bread and fish, their hands stained with tar. Families visit, bringing ale or mending clothes, turning the yard into a lively gathering. Building a ship binds people together, like a barn raising with higher stakes. For big projects, like a chieftain's longship, neighboring villages might pitch in, sharing tools or labor in exchange for future raid spoils. You imagine the pride when the ship launches, every worker knowing they helped create a legend. This community was also a top knowledge bank. Shipwrights didn't use blueprints. You recall the debate about templates versus instinct. But their expertise was a living library. They taught apprentices through hands-on work, pointing out how to read wood grain or adjust a keel's rocker. You see an older shipwright correcting a boy's rivet placement, his tone patient. This oral tradition kept designs consistent, from the Oseberg's ornate curves to the Gokstad's sturdy frame. It's like passing down a family recipe, except the dish is a 70-foot warship. Historians still argue whether shipbuilding was a specialized trade or a community-wide skill. Some say only elite shipwrights built longships, citing the precision of finds like Skuldelev's Ship 2. Others argue most Vikings knew basic shipbuilding, pointing to small fairings built by farmers. Likely, it varied. Master shipwrights led big projects, but everyone chipped in for smaller boats. Either way, the yard was a hive of shared purpose, each worker a thread in the ship's tapestry. As you watch the shipwright guide his apprentice, the yard's energy wraps around you. The clang of the forge, the clack of looms, the soft chatter of workers. It's a lullaby of unity and craft. Next, we'll immerse in the sensory world of shipbuilding, letting its sights and sounds carry you to sleep. For now, let the community's quiet strength and the steady pulse of the yard lull you deeper into the Viking world. You're not just here. You're part of history. One hammer stroke at a time, the Viking shipyard still cradles you in its steady hum. The tarred hull with its dragon-headed prow standing tall, a testament to the community's shared labor you just witnessed. The clang of the blacksmith's hammer and the clack of weavers' looms linger in the air, woven with the fjord's salty breath. You've seen the shipwrights, apprentices, and villagers pour their hearts into this ship, from oak to sail. Now let's pause the tools and tales to immerse in the sensory world of shipbuilding, letting the sights, sounds, and smells of the yard wash over you like a gentle tide. This is no ordinary history lesson. It's a soothing journey through the shipyard's heartbeat, as calming as a lullaby sung by the sea. Close your eyes. Let the Viking world carry you to sleep. Picture the sights first. You're standing by the ship, its clinker planks gleaming with fresh tar, black and glossy under the pale Nordic sun. The dragon head, carved with those swirling knots you saw, stares out, its oak scales catching the light. Piles of wood shavings curl at your feet, pale as snow, while stacks of seasoned oak, chosen back in the forest, wait nearby. Shipwrights move like dancers, their axes flashing as they shape planks, each swish, a brushstroke on this wooden canvas. Beyond the yard, the fjord sparkles, its ripples mirroring the ship's curves. You spot children darting between logs, their laughter a flicker of color in this earthy scene. It's a living painting, slow and deliberate, inviting you to drift. Now, listen to the sounds. The yard is a symphony, each note soft but distinct. The thwack of a broad axe bites into oak, steady as a metronome. The tap-tap of a mallet drives rivets home, a rhythm you've heard since the hull took shape. The scrape of a draw knife shaves planks, a whisper against the wood's grain. Ropes creak as the woolen sail, stitched by those weavers you met, flaps gently, catching a breeze. The blacksmith's clang echoes from the forge, crafting rivets like the ones you saw. Low voices murmur, shipwrights trading tips, apprentices asking questions, villagers sharing gossip. The fjord adds its own hum, waves lapping against the shore, a soft underscore to the yard's song. It's a melody that soothes, pulling you deeper into rest. Breathe in the sound. Smells. The air is rich, layered like a Viking feast. Fresh-cut oak, sharp and earthy, fills your lungs, a memory of the forest where this began. The piney tang of tar, boiled in those cauldrons, clings to the hull, smoky and warm. Wool from the sail carries a faint, musky scent, dyed red with ochre you saw brushed on. The fjord's briny breath drifts over, salty and clean, cutting through the yard's heaviness. You catch whiffs of linseed oil on oars and hemp ropes, earthy and slick. Somewhere a fire crackles, roasting fish for the worker's meal, its smoky sweetness a quiet comfort. Each scent is a thread, weaving you into the shipyard's spell. Feel the sharp textures around you. Run your hand along the hull, smooth where the draw knife worked, rough where tar sticks. The oak planks are cool, their grain telling stories of storms weathered and seas crossed. You brush a pile of shavings, soft as feathers, then grip a hemp rope, coarse and strong, like the shrouds holding the mast. The shipwright's adze, left on a log, is worn smooth from years of use, a silent partner in this craft. The muddy ground squelches under your boots, grounding you in this living, breathing yard. It's tactile, real, a world you can touch as you drift toward sleep. This sensory world wasn't just backdrop. It was the Vikings' lifeblood. Mainstream fact, shipyards like the one at Roskilde, active in the 11th century, were hubs of sensory activity, with archaeological finds of tools, tar pots, and wood scraps painting a vivid picture. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some shipwrights claimed they could hear a ship's readiness, the hull's creak, signaling it was tight and true. Historians still argue whether these sensory cues were practical or steeped in superstition. Did shipwrights trust their ears? Or was it Norse mysticism? Either way, the yard's pulse was their guide, as sure as the stars. As the ship stands ready, its hull glowing, you let the senses envelop you. The thwack of axes, the lap of waves, the tar's smoky tang. It's a cocoon of calm, a world where time slows. This ship, born of oak and community, carries you now, its story a gentle current. Joke, if I lived here, I'd fall asleep mid-tar brush and wake up stuck to the keel. Let the yard's rhythm fade, the ship's silhouette softening in your mind. You're safe here, cradled by history's tide. The shipyard quiets now, its pulse slowing as twilight drapes the fjord in soft grays. The thwack of axes fades, the creak of the mast a distant whisper, the tar's scent melting into the cool, salty air. You're still by the ship, its dragon head a shadow, watching over you like a guardian. The hull, tarred and ready, sways gently on its stalks, as if dreaming of the seas it'll sail. You feel the oak's warmth, the wool sail's softness, the fjord's breath, each a blanket tucking you in. The Viking's world, with its rhythms and crafts, settles around you, a story told in whispers. Let your thoughts drift, carried by the ship's quiet promise. Picture it gliding through mist, the lap of waves its only song, the stars above guiding it home. You're aboard now, safe in its clinker embrace, the sea rocking you like a cradle. The shipwrights, weavers, and blacksmiths fade, their work complete, leaving you with this vessel of dreams. There's no rush, no storm, only the gentle sway of history, pulling you deeper into rest. Breathe slow, let the fjord's hum fill your chest. The ship carries you further, its runes glowing faintly. A map to peace. You're not just in the shipyard. You're part of its story, woven into its planks and sails. The world softens, the sea whispers, and sleep beckons like a calm harbor. Let go, drift, and rest. The Viking's craft holds you now, a lullaby of oak and wind, guiding you to dreams as vast as the ocean.